Symmetric encryptions. Alice needs to transfer a file containing employee salaries to Bob over the internet, and it needs to be done securely. But what do we mean by secure? Imagine a world with two different types of bad guys, passive and active. There are bad guys that passively listen into other people's communication and steals confidential information. There are also bad guys that actively intercept messages, tampers with them, and then sends them on to the intended recipient. Different levels of security can defend against one or both types of bad guys. So when we talk about security, it is helpful to think about it in the following three ways. Firstly, there's confidentiality. We don't want anyone to be able to see the contents of what Alice is sending to Bob. We want the file to be secure from eavesdropping. Secondly, there's integrity. We don't want anyone to be able to change the file as it makes its way to Bob. We want the file to be secure from tampering. Thirdly, there's authentication. Bob needs to know the file really did come from Alice and not someone pretending to be Alice. Let's start with the first. To achieve confidentiality, Alice can encrypt the file and Bob can decrypt the file using a secret key that only the two of them have access to. Eavesdroppers cannot understand the messages unless they have the secret key. In this case, the key that Alice has is identical to Bob's, so Bob can also use it to encrypt a file to send back to Alice. A protocol that uses identical keys on both ends is called symmetric encryption. While this method of encryption can stop eavesdroppers, it cannot stop active attackers. Active attackers can intercept the file, and although they cannot decrypt the whole message, they can tamper with the encrypted file in such a way that Bob could receive the wrong information. You might wonder how an active attacker can do anything other than mess up a file that is encrypted. Well, in fact, by knowing some mathematical details about the encryption protocol, it is possible for the attacker to change out certain words or numbers without ever decrypting the file. The explanation for how this works is too involved to explain here, but I will paste a link in the notes if you want to find out more. So how can Alice ensure that no one can tamper with the file along the way? Well, recall in a previous video, we introduced the concept of hash functions. You can feed a message of any length in and get a unique sequence of 32 numbers and letters out, called the hash value. If Alice, in addition to sending the message, also sent a hash of the message to Bob, this way, after Bob receives the message, he can hash it and compare it with the hash that he received from Alice to make sure that nothing has changed. The only problem with this is that a man in the middle can simply intercept both the message and the hash from Alice, modify the message, then create a hash of the modified message, and then send both to Bob. And when Bob hashes the modified message, he will get the same hash as the one sent by the attacker, and he will think that this file is legitimate. To solve this problem, we need to use a special type of hash function that also takes in a secret shared key. So Alice and Bob can easily verify the hash, but the attacker cannot forge it without also having access to the shared secret key. This method is called Message Authentication Code, or simply MAC. Keep in mind that confidentiality and integrity don't always have to go together. For example, if Microsoft is releasing an update to their software, everyone needs to get a copy of it, so it is not confidential information. But before people install it, they need to ensure that it has not been tampered with, and the update really did come from Microsoft and not some man in the middle. In this case, MAC can be used without encrypting the software package. If we wanted to achieve confidentiality and preserve integrity, we can combine the encryption and hashing techniques to create what is called an authenticated encryption system. Here, Alice can encrypt the message using her secret key to produce ciphertext, and then feed the ciphertext into the hash function with the secret key. Bob will decrypt the ciphertext using his secret key to retrieve the original text and also feed the ciphertext into the hash function with his key to verify that the ciphertext has not been tampered with. This is a secure building block for many protocols, including blockchains. You might have noticed we have not yet touched on the third aspect of security, authentication. How does Bob know that the file really did come from Alice? Well, he met Alice last week in person in the office and she handed him their shared secret key and told him that they will use this key for their encrypted communication. So, unless someone stole it from her, he can feel confident that the encrypted file came from Alice. But what if they live in two different countries and have never met? How can they establish a shared secret key that's authenticated? This requires yet another important ingredient called public key cryptography that is very important in Web3. We will tackle that in the next video.